we may not agree with what our kids buy, but if they're not committing any crimes, they're working, responsibly and making money and paying and saving it and paying for what they want, we shouldn't trash them and refer to them as the lower economic people and say that they are not responsible and not doing things responsibly. But beyond that, I looked at another term. I said, well, if they're lower economic people, what's the higher economic people doing? Are they being responsible with all their money? And the answer to that is absolutely not. The higher economic people, to turn on Bill Cosby's phrase, make millions and millions of dollars every year, hundreds of millions of dollars in some cases. And what do they buy? What do they buy? What do these entertainers and athletes buy? Well, a lot of them buy 3 or 4 houses that they don't need, and then, or either rent them and can't pay the rent at some point. They buy watches that cost $50,000 and $60,000 a piece. They buy 16 cars. They buy these big things that hang around their neck that might cost $100,000 with all this diamond in them and everything. So what about the responsibilities of the higher economic people? All of this goes into this article that I wrote, The Thinking, called Economic Crime and Punishment. We are committing crimes against ourselves economically by not being responsible with our dollars, not just the lower economic people, because some of the lower economic people are committing crimes and then taking the money that they make from those crimes and spending it on ridiculous things. It's what Dr. Claude Anderson says about us sometimes. We can't even do wrong right. We'll get money by illegitimate means and then spend it or give it away right back to the very folks that we're complaining about, instead of saving it and doing what the Italians did a long time ago and others, turning illegitimate businesses into legitimate business. I'm not advocating that. I'm just saying that if you're going to do wrong, at least do wrong right. So both levels, lower and upper, we're not being responsible in many cases with the dollars that we have. That's a crime. It's a crime against us, ourselves. So we are committing crimes against ourselves in addition to the physical crimes. We hear about that all the time. Every other day we read the paper or we hear the news and somebody got shot in Avondale or Bond Hill or Walnut Hills or Evanston. You know who they are. So we're committing those kinds of crimes, but we're also committing economic crimes against ourselves, against one another, by not doing what we should be doing, or at least to a larger degree, with the dollars that we have, whether we have a few dollars or whether we have millions. So in answer to Cosby's comments, I said, hey, there's a whole lot of blame to go around when you're talking about being responsible with our dollars. And much of it goes to the higher economic people. This whole notion of crime against one another. Again, physical crime, we see that all the time. Economic crime, if we are committing crimes against ourselves, where then does the punishment come in? Well, here's how it flows. We commit the crimes against ourselves, and we end up being punished for the crimes that we commit against ourselves, economic crimes. Now, we are our accuser. We indict ourselves, we convict ourselves, and we punish ourselves because of our inappropriate behavior when it comes to the marketplace and the dollars that we have. Yet we continue to brag about black people have $1 trillion that we spend every year. So what? So what? What does it get us? It doesn't get us anything. It just continues to manifest, unless we change, and until we change, it continues to manifest inappropriate behavior on all levels. So this article that I wrote, you'll probably see it the week of maybe September the 20th or so. Economic crime and punishment. I started out by referring to the 13th Amendment. Of course, I've talked about that many, many times. and I hope you've read it by now as many times as I have suggested you read it, where it says that slavery has been abolished except for those who are duly convicted of crimes. That's in the U.S. Constitution, the 13th Amendment. There's an exception in the slavery clause. But we run around talking about, oh, slavery's been abolished for years. No, not for those who have been duly convicted of crimes. And if you've been duly convicted of a crime and they send you to a prison, a federal prison or wherever, and they have you working for 50 cents a week, making products that they're selling on the open market, making millions of dollars off your labor, you are a slave. That's exactly what you are, a slave. So the whole notion of economic crimes and punishment gets to the point that some of us are actually volunteering to be slaves by going out and doing stupid things, committing stupid crimes, committing crimes against one another, that, we're going to be punished for that now. Keep that in mind. In the long run, we're going to be punished for all that crime, physical and economic. But we volunteer to do that. We just go out and do it haphazardly, go to jail, create another $1 million for someone who owns the prison, and work for 50 cents a week, and then beg our parents and our relatives to send us money to put on our book, or whatever they call it in there, and pay outlandish rates for long-distance phone calls, and get ripped off continuously because you did something stupid to go to jail in the first place. It's enough that many of our people are in jail who should not be. Isn't that enough? But we have some folks volunteering to go by doing stupid things. Now, I worked hard many years on helping to get William Mayo out of prison. I believe to this day he never should have been there, but he ended up doing, I think, 19 years for a crime he didn't commit. So we have enough work to do trying to get the folks out of prison who are in there who shouldn't be. We have enough work to do. But yet we pile it on. We punish ourselves with more crime, and we enrich others by committing these crimes, and walk around complaining about it all the time. Well, they're putting all our men in jail. Come on. We bear some responsibility for that. Some. I understand the injustice, I understand the unfairness and all the other issues that Michelle Alexander and others have talked about. But I'm talking about the real bottom line of crime, economic crime, and punishment. And it's really a crime when you volunteer, first of all, to be a slave. And it's a crime when you take your money and rather than pool it in some way or aggregate it in some way, that you would take it and give it right back to the folks that you're complaining about. That makes absolutely no sense. Again, we're committing a crime. That's a crime. And it's really a sickness that we have. So I did this article, and I used, for the backdrop of the article, a book that I've had, since 2001, called Black on Black Violence by Dr. Amos Wilson. And I'll read you a couple of quotes from his book and continue with my thoughts on this. He posed two questions in this book. He says, does the African American community, by continuing to permit itself to be legitimately economically exploited by non-African American communities, thereby delegitimize itself and permit itself to be criminalized while decriminalizing its exploiters? Are we voluntarily doing that, he asks? And then he says, has the African American community, addicted to wasteful and nonsensical consumerism, with its unwillingness to invest its wealth and human resources in itself, in America, and uncommitted to controlling its own internal markets, has it contributed in no small way to the criminalization of its sons, to the increasing impoverishment of its children, to the violence that prevails within its households and neighborhoods? Those are two questions. I know those are long sentences, but Amos Wilson wrote in very long sentences if you've ever read any of his work. But I believe that he had so much to say. He was so full of information that he just went on and on and on sometimes with his sentences. But he died, I think, around 1998 after writing his monumental work, Blueprint for Black Power, which is a 900-page book. So he really had a lot to say. But he posed those questions, and those questions speak directly to what I'm talking about now, how we voluntarily participate in creating wealth for everyone else except ourselves, and how we voluntarily participate in being the actual raw material for wealth, for the prison industrial complex, as well as other businesses and industries. We are the raw material for a lot of businesses in this country. And we voluntarily do it. Why? Because we don't do the opposite. We don't aggregate our own money. We don't leverage our own economic power. And as I've always said, it's not power unless you use it. Power is nothing if you don't use it. Like I said, it's like a battery sitting in Walmart somewhere on a rack. You think it has power, don't you? You think it can make your flashlight come on. So you buy it. But you'll never know until you put it in there and then turn it on. So until we turn on this so-called power that we have, voting power, economic power, buying power, until we use it, we really don't have it. It's just hanging on the rack, waiting to be used. So we are participating. Here's another way to put it. We are financing our own oppression. We're financing it. We complain about, oh, they're treating us bad, and oh, we don't get a break, and we're at the bottom. We're helping to finance that. We should be financing our own freedom, not our own oppression. We have enough money to do it, but do we have the will to do it? And my answer is, up to this point, based upon all the work that I've done over decades and what I've seen, the answer is absolutely no. Now, there are some isolated movements and programs around the country that I'm familiar with and I've worked with that have done some positive things in terms of pooling resources, building businesses, and carving out niches in different industries. Can't deny that. There's been a lot of good work. But far too many of us have not done a thing but sit around and talked about the problem or listened to somebody else talk about it and then went back to sleep. That's all we've done. And here we find ourselves, like I said, 50 years after King made his speech in Washington. We haven't moved 1 inch closer to where he wanted us to be. That's an insult to him. Many people said that he would not have even been invited to the last march, to the 50th anniversary of the march, because of his stance on the war, because of his principles on economic empowerment. We don't need you at this one, Martin, because we still talking about civil rights, whatever that is. That's what you talked about 50 years ago. That's what we still talking about. So you don't need to come to this, Martin. You can set this one out. You old anyway, so why don't you just sit at home and watch? We got this. We're into politics now. We're into to being puppets for the puppet master. So, we really need to give some thought to what we're doing with our dollars and what we're doing vis-a-vis the symbolism that we love so much. We're being misled, brothers and sisters. We're being misled by a bunch of charlatans, shysters, and hucksters who are out here telling us everything that we should be doing, and at the end of the day, it boils down to nothing for ourselves. There are a few folks out here still sounding the alarm, still trying to get us to take care of ourselves economically. But I'm so glad to see a young person like Michelle Alexander to come to the realization that, hey, I need to talk a whole lot more about a whole lot more than just mass incarceration. I need to connect the dots for folks. And that's what she's doing. I'm proud of that.